Chapter 4. Excalibur. It was midsummer when King Arthur left Camelot to visit some of his lands. He reached the town of Caerleon in Wales, where a great feast had been arranged in his honour. Arthur was delighted when he received news that 6 kings were coming to visit him. Among them were his brothers-in-law, King Lot of Lothian and King Uriens of Gore. They had married Arthur's sisters, Margaux and Morgan le Fay. He was so happy that he sent out servants to greet them with gifts. He was very surprised when the servants returned with the gifts. "Why is this?" asked Arthur. One of the servants explained, "The kings refused your gifts. They say you are not of royal blood and are not the rightful king. They refuse to be ruled by you." "What does this mean?" asked Arthur. "They are not coming alone," said another servant. "They have thousands of knights. They are determined to kill you and put another on the throne." The alarm bells in the city were rung, and every able-bodied man was called to arms. But even then Arthur could only muster but a few hundred men to meet the thousands now marching on the town. As the kings were planning their attack, Merlin suddenly appeared in the middle of them. "Even if you had 100,000 men," he warned, "you would not win this day. King Arthur is the true king, so return to your lands and give Arthur your allegiance." "What nonsense," said King Lot. "I won't listen to the words of an old blustering sorcerer. Begone." But King Lot trembled when Merlin told him that he would meet his death if they attacked the town. Merlin next went to Arthur and told him to open the city gate. Arthur could not believe Merlin's advice, but the wise enchanter insisted. "Do as I say, and place your men on the city walls and on all the city's rooftops." So the great gate was opened. The kings stared in astonishment. "Sound the trumpets for the attack," roared King Uriens. The trumpets bellowed, the banners waved. Then, with a terrifying battle cry, knights in heavy armour on horses charged towards the gate, swirling their battle axes in the air. Behind them came thousands of foot soldiers, brandishing swords. King Lot led the attack as they swept through the gate, but so narrow were the streets that soon knights and soldiers alike were completely hemmed in. They could move neither backwards nor forwards. Arthur's men on the town walls and rooftops above hailed down a storm of arrows, rocks, and burning oil. There had never been such a slaughter. Many hundreds of knights and men died before the kings could find a way out of the castle. But they hadn't finished. They attacked again. This time Arthur and his men mounted their horses and met the attack with lance, sword, and battle-axe. Arthur was still outnumbered, but he and his men fought so bravely that the attackers retreated again. Arthur, gallantly leading his warriors, gave orders to ride out of the castle and chase the escaping rebels. One by one, the 6 kings' best men were cut down. Arthur's first great battle had been won. That evening, as they counted the enemy dead, they found the body of King Lot among the fallen. Arthur looked sadly at the piles of dead. "I promise that one day there will be peace in this land," he vowed. A few days later, Arthur and his followers returned to Camelot. They came within sight of the castle as evening fell. Arthur saw a shadowy figure beside the well-worn track and realized it was Merlin. Soon he was walking beside Arthur. "You see," he began, "I knew victory would be yours at Caerleon. Now I think there is something else I can do for you." Arthur was surprised at what Merlin said, because at that moment there was something he wanted. "I broke my sword in the battle," he said. "I must find another one." "Not a mile from here lies a sword fit for a king," said Merlin. "Follow me." Arthur's knights were worried when they saw their king ride off with Merlin. They wanted to go with him to protect him, but Merlin ordered them to continue on to Camelot. Arthur and Merlin rode towards the setting sun. They reached the brow of a hill, and Arthur saw beneath them a broad lake, surrounded by trees. Its waters were as smooth as silk. Not the slightest breeze unsettled the surface. The shadows of the trees reflected magically on the water. Soon they reached the edge of the lake, and Merlin called out, "Nimue, Nimue, Lady of the Lake, the king has come." Arthur heard a gentle splash in the middle of the lake. He looked out and saw a milky white arm break through the surface. In its hand was a magnificent, gleaming sword. "There is your blade," said Merlin. "It's called Excalibur." Suddenly Arthur felt the presence of someone nearby. He looked all about him, but he could see nothing but mists which were creeping around the lake's edge. Then out of the mist came a barge carrying the most beautiful lady he had ever seen. "Merlin," said Arthur, a little frightened at the strange figure. "Who is she?" "Nimue, the Lady of the Lake," said Merlin. "I have spoken to you about her already. She will be your guardian in some of your troubles ahead, and it is her beauty which will soon steal my magic and take me away from you." The barge drifted into the bank in front of Arthur. The lady looked closely at Arthur, but did not say a word. It was Arthur who spoke first. "Whose sword is that?" he asked, pointing to the blade still flashing in the middle of the lake. "I have need of one." "It is mine," said Nimue, the Lady of the Lake. "And for a promise, it will be yours." Arthur promised that he would give her anything she asked. The Lady of the Lake beckoned Arthur to join her in the barge. No sooner was he aboard than it moved away, as if powered by some secret force. It glided out to where the mysterious arm still held the sword aloft. Arthur's eyes opened wide when he saw the sword. Its hilt was decorated with gold and precious stones, and the blade gave off a dazzling light. He grasped it with both hands and lifted it into the air. The arm which had held it slipped beneath the surface of the water and vanished. The barge floated back to the shore where Merlin was waiting. "It is the finest sword that I have ever seen," said Arthur. "But what promise must I make?" "Promise me," said Nimue, "that when you die, you will return Excalibur to me." Arthur gave her his promise as the barge moved away. In a moment it had disappeared into the mists again. "Excalibur is no ordinary sword," said Merlin, as they rode away from the enchanted lake. "It will protect you. Whenever it is with you, you and your kingdom will be safe. But be warned that without it, your life will be in much danger. Keep it by your side always." There was bad news for King Arthur when he reached Camelot again. The 5 kings who had survived the Battle of Caerleon had joined forces with 5 more kings and were marching south. Arthur sent out spies, and they reported that the kings were coming with tens of thousands of men-at-arms. "We are doomed," said Arthur. "They will overrun us. We cannot match their forces." Merlin appeared at his side once more. "Prepare for battle," he said. "Victory will be yours. You will see. Now, I must away. I have work to do." Arthur called his warrior knights together and told them what Merlin had said. Many were worried because Arthur only had but a few hundred men, but wise Sir Ulfius calmed everyone. "Put your trust in Merlin," he said. "With Merlin on our side we will win the battle." Sir Brastias agreed. "Soon comes the eve of Halloween, my lord. You must choose that day to fight." "Why Halloween?" asked Arthur. "'Tis the night when ghosts and hobgoblins are about," said Sir Baldwin. "It is Merlin's night." Arthur marched out his few hundred men and took up a position on a hill with a great forest at his back. Day by day he looked down and saw his enemies preparing for battle. Never had such a large army come together. Days passed, and there was still no sign of Merlin. At last, the eve of Halloween arrived, and Arthur knew the battle could be delayed no longer. he called on his knights to prepare to fight at sunset. The kings in the valley below laughed when they saw Arthur's few hundred men mount their horses. "It will be over at the first charge," they laughed. Arthur lined up his knights and took his place at the front. "Sound the trumpets," he cried. "May God and his miracles be with us in battle." The trumpets blasted out, and Arthur and his knights rode down the hill, first at a trot, then a canter, and finally at full gallop. The rebel king's men waited for the attack, protected by lines of thick stakes sharpened to a point. They were sure Arthur's men and horses would all be impaled on the deadly stakes. But the gallant knights flew down the hill like the wind, and when they reached the lines of stakes, they jumped right over them, striking out at the enemy with their swords. The speed of the charge carried King Arthur's men right through the enemy lines and up the other side of the valley. Once more they charged into the attack, leaping over the enemy, striking 1,000 blows with swords and battle-axes. Arthur looked down and saw that the attacks had surprised the 10 kings. He lined up his knights and prepared to attack again. He was almost ready to give the order to charge when he heard a strange sound coming from the forest behind him. It sounded like a roll of approaching thunder. Arthur looked back, but he could see nothing in the darkness. Sir Ulfius saw him looking back and called out, "Don't worry, my lord. Remember, this is Halloween. Many strange creatures are about. Come, we must attack again." The trumpets sounded, and Arthur's men swept down the hill again. Hardly had the horses reached a canter when Arthur heard another trumpet call and saw the most amazing sight. The enemy were fleeing, scampering away in every direction. Arthur could not understand it, until he looked back in the direction from where the sound trumpet call had come. "Ye!" cried Arthur, seeing tens of thousands of men bursting out from the forest. And there, sitting high in a tree, was Merlin. "I have brought you an army," he cried. "Charge again. Victory is yours." Arthur and his knights galloped down the hill with Merlin's men behind them. The battle was quick and bloody. The rebels were slaughtered, and the killing only stopped when Arthur cried out to the kings to lay down their arms and surrender. "Why are we fighting each other," said King Arthur, "when our real enemy, the heathens, are pillaging our lands? They will destroy us unless we fight together. United, we will sweep them from our country." At last, the 10 kings saw the truth, and one by one came forward and swore allegiance to King Arthur, promising to fight for him against the heathens. Just then, 2 more kings in full battle armor rode up and dismounted. They knelt before King Arthur. "Sir, we served your father well," said the first, "and today we have had the honor to battle for his son." Arthur was confused, but Merlin came to explain. "When I left you, I went to France to seek help from your father's most loyal allies. These men are King Ban of Benwick and King Bors of Gaul. It was their armies which came to win this day with you." Arthur warmly embraced the 2 kings from France and ordered that a great feast be prepared to celebrate the day. That night, Arthur shared his table with not just the 2 French kings, but with the 10 others who were now his sworn allies and loyal servants. And so Arthur became king of Britain. In the months ahead, he led his armies against the heathen warriors. 12 great battles he fought, and 12 times he was victorious. Arthur, king of all Britain, had won his kingdom.